Everyone has some kind of emotional memory tied to this game that defined an entire era. But is the electricity in GTA San Andreas actually realistic? Is there any chance that these power lines end up in places that make sense? And what about this dam? Does it really generate energy for the cities in the game? And what happens if we destroy it? In this video, we're gonna find out whether Grove Street is fully connected to the game's power grid. We're also gonna look for transformers, transmission towers, substations, and where all that energy actually comes from. And is it possible for CJ to get shocked? We'll also take a look at a bit of Los Angeles architectural history and why some areas in Los Santos don't have power poles at all. We're about to uncover pretty much everything there is to uncover about electricity in San Andreas. When we talk about the legendary GTA San Andreas, we usually end up talking about secrets that, with each passing day, make it feel like Rockstar is secretly pushing updates without telling anyone, but keeping up with the tradition of this channel, where we break down the realism in games, especially Rockstar Games titles. Our goal today is to analyze the electricity system in GTA San Andreas. We're going to examine every point of interest related to this topic in the game, from the urban areas of San Andreas all the way to the rural regions. And honestly, there's no better place to start than the spot on the map that's practically the game's point zero. Grove Street is definitely the perfect place to begin taking a closer look at the game's power grid. Let's find out which houses are actually connected and whether Rockstar really thought about this during development. It's also important to point out one very big detail. We're expecting this level of care from a game that's more than 20 years old and originally ran on very limited hardware, with almost no resources. With that in mind, let's find out which houses are actually connected here on Grove Street. Grove Street is a great place to start this analysis. Starting with Ryder's house, as we can see up there, we have 2 power connections. Actually, if you look behind it, there's one more connection. So in total, there are 3 connections to the power grid. Ryder was well supplied here. Now for CJ's house, we have 1 connection in the front and another one in the back. And I think that's it. This house right here has only 1 connection, pretty well done, right? Over at Sweet's house, we have 2 more connections, but then when we get to this next house, we don't find any connection at all. Unfortunately, I think the artist forgot to connect this house to the power grid. I believe it's the only one here that's completely disconnected. And if we move over to this house on the right, it's connected. You can even see 2 wires running there. Now checking this house on the left, we also have 2 connections, and that house where OG Lock Party happens is connected more than once as well. In reality, it's connected 3 times. It's impressive how some houses ended up with extra connections while others were completely forgotten. This one next to it is also connected to the grid with 2 connections. Now looking at the house on the left, it's connected as well, but with only 1 connection. And that wraps up Grove Street. Now that we've checked the level of detail the artist put just into Grove Street, we can really start exploring other parts of the map and try to understand where the poles lead and whether they end somewhere that makes sense, and what exactly we're looking for to make all of this add up. In a very simplified version of how a real power distribution system works, we need to look for a few specific structures. The first structure is the source of all the energy, which could be a hydroelectric plant or even a thermoelectric power station. Once that energy is generated, it needs to be transmitted, and for that, we use those giant towers that carry high voltage power lines, the ones you see along the highway when you're traveling. These massive towers carry electricity at very high voltage. After that, we need to reduce that voltage through a substation, which is a facility designed exactly for that purpose. Once the voltage is lowered, the energy is sent through power poles, which, using transformers, adjust the electricity so it can be delivered to our homes. And that's our second mission within the game. Can we actually find these elements in the game? Well, the first structure related to power generation, if you're a GTA veteran, you probably already know where I'm going with this. Yes, the Sherman Dam. It's the main source of energy in the game's universe. I couldn't find any other structure in the game that actually generates power. So in this video, I'm assuming that this plant supplies all 3 cities in the game, meaning San Fierro, Los Santos, and Las Venturas. And we know for sure that it powers at least Las Venturas, because there's a mission where we have to sabotage the dam. We'll talk more about that a little later in the video. Now, the second item is the transmission towers, which are honestly very easy to find. They're spread all over the game, especially in the desert and rural areas. These structures were a nightmare for anyone who liked flying around back in the PlayStation 2 days, because with the console's limitations, they would usually load in at the last second. What's most impressive is that even considering how simple the models look today, Rockstar still made sure to include aircraft warning lights on them. That's something that exists in real life and is mandatory. So that's a big point for realism. It's really cool to see that they cared about that level of detail. A curious detail is that some towers in the game have these concrete blocks placed around them to stabilize the structure, but based on the examples I've seen in real life, that's not exactly how it worked. We'll explain that too when we get to the part about the dam. After that, these transmission towers send the energy to substations, which are responsible for lowering the voltage because electricity needs to be transmitted at very high voltage to be efficient. In GTA San Andreas, we can find 3 substations in the game. The most famous one is located in the Ganton or Hanau Field area, right near Grove Street. You've definitely passed by this substation before. You've probably even wondered if CJ can get shocked there, especially since it's so close to the mod garage we're introduced to at the very beginning of the game. So it's hard to imagine anyone who hasn't noticed that substation. The second one is over in Tierra Rabada, and finally the last one is in Bone County. An interesting detail to mention is that while researching this video, someone sent me a clip from a well-known Brazilian YouTube channel called Nobreza Game. In that video, he claims that CJ can get electrocuted in one of these substations. He climbs onto its base where one of the cables is connected to the tower, and then this happens. But in reality, that's not possible in the game. What actually happens is that this game has a chronic bug on PC, especially when it's played above 60 frames per second. Randomly, whenever CJ climbs certain obstacles like dumpsters, walls, or other objects, he can simply have a sudden heart attack and die. What happens in the video isn't because he's standing on top of a transformer, but because this bug can actually happen anywhere. So while he's climbing up the transformer, we can see CJ suddenly black out and drop dead. A curious detail is that this PC bug happens when you play the game without the frame limiter, above 60 frames per second. These days, the community is very active and has already created fix mods that make the game stable above 60 frames on PC. And of course, I'm referring to the original version, not the remaster. This bug didn't just cause the confusion about CJ being electrocuted, it also sparked years of debate where many players insisted that CJ could have a heart attack just by climbing certain objects. Another thing that reinforced that theory is the fact that when you gain weight in the game, you get a warning saying you might have a heart attack if you keep getting heavier, but that doesn't actually happen. CJ dying randomly is simply because of this FPS bug. So this really helps us debunk the myth that CJ could die from a heart attack or get electrocuted. Now getting back to it, we already know everything about the substations, so now we need to look for what's actually the simplest part of the game, the power poles. And obviously, those aren't hard to find. They're everywhere. Well, not in every part of the city. If you spent hours walking around the streets of Los Santos, you've probably noticed that the wealthier areas don't have power poles at all, only traffic light poles. And the truth is, that's not a coincidence, it's not a bug, and it's not a technical limitation. Rockstar accurately recreated something Los Angeles had already done, which was burying most of the electrical wiring underground for aesthetic reasons, but also to prevent issues caused by weather and other problems that come with exposed wiring. In the suburbs though, we can see power lines almost everywhere. Seriously, I'm sure you never noticed this before, but yes, this difference between exposed wiring and underground wiring is completely realistic. Now that we basically understand everything about the poles in the game, we need to look at another realistic detail. As we can see, they have small transformers on them, which are responsible for the third and final step of adapting the energy before sending it to the houses so it can be used. This is a completely realistic detail that honestly blew my mind when I noticed it. It's impressive because even in GTA 5, it's not that common to find poles with transformers. In this game though, they're everywhere. In GTA 5 they exist too, but there are far fewer compared to how many we see in San Andreas. With that, we wrap up all the structures we need to find in the game for it to be considered realistic. So for now, realism approved 100%. But before we move on to the next stage, let's do a quick recap of everything we found in the game. First, the Sherman Dam where the energy is generated. Then the transmission towers where the energy is carried. Next, the substation where the voltage is transformed and prepared to be sent through low voltage poles. And finally, the power poles that connect the electrical grid to each home. Knowing all of that, we can say we're already halfway there in terms of the game's realism, because almost all the necessary structures are present in the world. Another detail I need to highlight is Rockstar's attempt to represent different times of day in the game, and you've definitely noticed this. At certain hours, windows in buildings light up to give the impression that life is happening inside and that the building is inhabited. Houses do this too. In theory, it's an electrical feature. The funny thing is that in some regions, especially smaller towns, this doesn't seem to happen. Maybe Rockstar forgot to add this functionality in those small villages so they stay dark all the time, even though nighttime is exactly when electricity use increases the most. Now that we understand pretty much all the structures, we can finally ask, are the power poles actually connected all the way back to the energy source? which, as everything suggests, is the Sherman Dam. Well, we can follow the power poles for quite a long time, but the answer isn't as simple as it seems. Before we get to that, we need to understand a bit more about the Sherman Dam, how it works in the game, and how it works in real life. When we talk about the Sherman Dam, we're actually talking about the Hoover Dam. In the real world, it's one of the greatest engineering projects of the 20th century. It was built between 1931 and 1936 on the Colorado River, and to this day it supplies nearby cities, controls flooding, and generates energy for millions of people. It's gigantic, over 220 meters tall, and it creates Lake Mead, the largest man-made reservoir in the United States. It's a symbol of power and of humanity's ability to reshape nature. Now, looking inside the universe of San Andreas, Rockstar clearly took inspiration from the Hoover Dam when designing the Sherman Dam. In the game, it serves as the main source of energy for the entire state of San Andreas, supplying all three major cities. The difference is that in the game, the dam works much more as a scenic element than a fully functional structure. But even so, the level of detail is impressive. At one point in the story, during the Caligula's casino heist setup, there's a mission where we need to blow up the generators, cutting off power to Las Venturas. And considering the size of the dam, I'm sure it probably supplies San Fierro and Los Santos as well. I found a really cool video explaining how this dam works. It's almost a perfect replica with the obvious limitations of the time. These two structures collect water and push it into the mountain through large pipes, which then drop the water onto the generators, the same ones we blow up during the mission. That movement spins the turbines and produces electricity. Of course, this in a very simplified way. It's super cool and really well done. Not a perfect replica, but definitely crafted with care. A question I get all the time in the comments of my other electricity videos, which by the way are up here in the cards, is whether it's possible to destroy the power source outside of the mission. Like, if we destroy the generators, would we cause a blackout across the whole map? Obviously the answer is no, because that system just doesn't work literally in the game engine. Most of these structures and connections exist symbolically, not as a fully functional electrical system. But I'll admit, it would be awesome if you could actually shoot at the dam and destroy it, or break into the generator room and cause a real blackout in the city. Sadly, that's impossible. But imagine if it worked like Watch Dogs, where you can literally shut the whole city down. Another detail I can't skip is how completely insane and unrealistic it is to see CJ jump off the top of the dam at the end of that mission. That's pure madness. In real life, the dam is over 220 meters tall. At that height, no matter what technique you use, our dear CJ would be gone at the moment he hit the water. At extreme heights, the impact of water and the impact of a solid surface are almost the same because of the extreme deceleration. And hey, don't go jumping off anything high thinking you're CJ. You would not survive that jump, but sure, all in the name of entertainment. Now, getting back to the question of whether the power poles are really connected all the way to the energy source in San Andreas, we have to remember this is a game that's more than 20 years old. The answer is not that simple. In some towns like Fort Carson or Las Payasadas, the power grid makes some sense. Almost every structure is connected, which is pretty impressive, but the grid loops usually end in strange places, like in the middle of a bridge or connected to some random pole that doesn't lead anywhere. In the city, using Grove Street as an example, the neighborhood is only connected internally. The wires don't lead anywhere else, so Grove Street is basically isolated from the outside grid. In some places, we can try to give the game the benefit of the doubt and assume the wiring goes underground or something like that. But most of the time, the lines just end in random spots or connect to something that makes no sense. There's a pretty cool region in Tierra Robada where the wiring forms one of the longest connections in the game, and across various parts of the map, the developers even added extra poles to interconnect small houses, farms, and agricultural structures, probably because it was a remote area with fewer models, so there was a bit more memory available to add extra details. But like the other circuits, they eventually end in nothing. Still, many of them are connected pole to pole. The wires themselves aren't very realistic, they're basically flat textures arranged in a three-dimensional space with transparency. But honestly, considering the time, it's impressive that they even included wires at all. Overall, I'd say the electricity system in this game is very well crafted, considering the limitations of that era, and they were many. You can clearly see the developers tried to add as much detail as possible, but the technology just wasn't there yet. So, the final answer to our question is not really. The connections aren't linked from start to finish like in GTA 5, where almost every line makes sense and everything is wired consistently. In GTA San Andreas, some places allow you to assume the wires go underground, especially when they're close to transmission towers, but very often those transmission towers just end in the middle of nowhere, and that's fine. I just need to be honest with the evaluation. But aside from that, yes, everything else about the electricity is very realistic. And if you like videos about this game and power grids, I also have one about Red Dead. Go watch it.